Hello everybody, Dio here from K Diagnostics. Today we have a 1998 Ford E350 with a 7.3, and the complaint on this van is that the fuel gauge reads full all the time. Even when the fuel tank is empty, it still reads full. So let's confirm the complaint first and see what we can do with it. So let's turn the key. Right there, the fuel tank is reading full. Just one more time. The fuel tank is reading full. And just to verify, I went ahead and drained the fuel tank. This is an old truck, and the good thing about these old trucks is that, you know, these old fuel tanks had fuel drain plugs. So I went ahead and undid the drain plug and I drained all the fuel from the fuel tank, but still it's still showing full. So I'm gonna give you guys a shot of the fuel tank under the van so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Let's go under the van and just... So here's the fuel tank. As you guys can tell, I mean, it's so rusty down here. It is it's an old truck, so what do you expect? And this is the drain plug. I already undid it. Undid it already, but let's take it out and see if any fuel is gonna come out of it. As you guys can tell, it is completely empty. I mean, it definitely sounds like an empty fuel tank. So the fuel tank is empty, but the gauge is showing full. So there is our problem. So let's think about it, guys. What do you think is the issue? Just take a moment and think about it. While you guys are thinking about it, while we are all thinking about it, I'm gonna go ahead and pull out a wiring diagram so we can look at the circuit of this fuel gauge. Let's look at the circuit of this fuel gauge and see what it looks like, and see how it works, so we can figure out how we can start doing some testing and find this issue. So next, let's get the wiring diagram and go from there. Okay guys, so here is the wiring diagram for our fuel gauge circuit. Okay, so on the right hand side here I have the engine computer, and on the left hand side here I have the instrument cluster, and right around the middle here I have our fuel pump module under vehicle in fuel tank. So this is our fuel sending unit right here. So we're gonna focus on this circuit. So that's why I highlighted it, so that it can be easy for us to track down. Like I said, here is our computer, and I did not look at how this circuit works, but these old fuel level circuits, pretty much these older ones work the same way. Usually there's a voltage that comes in, and then the fuel sending unit in the tank is a variable resistor, and then there's a ground on the other side. As current flows through the resistor, current flow changes when the float in the tank either goes up and down, and you know, and then that information gets reported back to the ECM and the cluster to show us the correct level inside the tank. So if you look closely here, you'll see on this pin it says fuel signal. So the computer puts out some type of signal, and this is a voltage. So it's either a battery voltage, 12 volts, or maybe 10 volts or 5 volts. I don't know. We will find out when we do some testing here in a moment. So the computer puts out this signal. So this signal travels down this wire, this yellow and white wire. So it gets to this splice right here. Some of it goes down to the fuel sending unit in the tank, and also some of it goes here to the instrument cluster. Okay, so usually this is what happens. The instrument cluster is looking at the voltage that the computer is putting out. If the computer puts out 12 volts, for example, and then let's hypothetically say if it sees 12 volts, it reads full. Okay, so if the same 12 volts makes it out to the cluster, it's gonna show 12 volts. If it sees lesser voltage, let's say 5 volt, it says it reads maybe half tank or empty, you know, and so on. So in our case here, we're gonna have to do a couple tests. So as you can tell here, the fuel pump module in the tank is fed some type of voltage here by the computer, and then on the other side of the circuit there's another wire which is a ground that also goes to this fuel sending unit in the tank. So how are we gonna test this? How are we gonna figure out where the problem is? So what we're gonna do, we're gonna get to this fuel sending unit connector, disconnect it. We're gonna back probe this wire, and we're gonna be in a voltage scale. So we're gonna back probe it. So with our multimeter, we're gonna back probe. We're gonna put the red test lead of the multimeter to this wire, and then the black lead to chassis ground somewhere under the van. Okay, with the key on, we should read some type of voltage here, maybe 12 volt or 5 volt. If we don't read any voltage here, what does that tell us, guys? It tells us that there's an open in this circuit somewhere. Okay, and then the next step would be testing this ground. So now we're gonna test. I like testing grounds with a test light. So we're gonna get our test light and connect it to battery positive because we're testing a ground. We're gonna back probe this black and yellow wire here. If we see, after we back probe it, if our test light lights, it means our ground is good. If the test light doesn't light, it means we have an open in our ground circuit here. Okay, so those are the tests we will do, and then the last test would be bypassing this sending unit, because the first test that we're gonna do is only gonna tell us the circuit integrity from the computer all the way to the sending unit, because it's not gonna tell us if this side of the circuit here is good. From this splice to the dash. So the circuit, the test that will tell us that the circuit going to the dash is also good is the bypass test we're gonna do. So we're gonna connect our test light to this ground, and then the other side of the test light to this wire here, that yellow and white wire. So our test light, the bulb inside the test light would replace this resistor. Okay, so current is gonna come and flow through our test light bulb and go through. So once we do this, if we see some type of movement on the dash, so if our gauge moves, what does that tell us, guys? It's gonna tell us that the circuit here from the sending unit going up to the computer and then all the way up to the dash here is good. Okay, and then this sending unit here is a variable resistor. There's a wiper here, so this wiper goes either up or down. When voltage gets here, so you have current flow that travels through this resistor. As this voltage, or as this wiper goes up, current flow increases. When it goes down, it decreases. Okay, which actually tells us the level of fuel inside the tank. So this wiper here is connected to the float arm inside the tank. Okay, so let's go under the van and do some testing at this fuel sending unit connector. Okay guys, so we are under the van right now, and this is the fuel sending unit electrical connector. So this connector right here is the one that goes to the fuel sending unit. and I have identified our wires. This yellow wire here, I hope you guys can see this. This is our yellow wire, our signal wire, and then the other wire here is our black and white wire. So it's a black wire with a white tracer. I don't know why they have 4 wires on this connector, while the sending unit itself only has 2 wires. I believe only 2 wires for that resistor. Okay, so let's do some testing here. Let's take some measurements here. So let's start with the signal wire first, which is the yellow wire, this wire right here, where I have my red back probe. So I'm gonna use this clear wire with these alligator clips. I'm gonna connect this one to and then I have a multimeter here. I'm gonna use my multimeter, and the multimeter is on the voltage scale, and I'm gonna connect my black lead to chassis ground and my red lead to the signal wire on our fuel gauge circuit. Okay, so on my multimeter I'm reading 10 volts, 10.89 volts. So this is because so this is what I'm doing. Hopefully you guys can see that. Yeah, so this is the sending unit. I am connected between this wire, so I got my multimeter here. So positive lead of the multimeter to this wire and negative lead to chassis ground. So that's what I have, and this is the reading I'm getting. I'm reading 10.89 volts. So which tells me that our circuit from up here to here is good because we have some type of voltage. And remember that this voltage is coming from the computer. So the engine computer is supplying this voltage. So it tells me, at least, not this side though, but it tells me about this one though. So this side of the circuit, it tells me that this side of the circuit is good. Okay? So that's what I'm doing right there. Now, the next test would be testing the ground. So now we have to test this wire down here, which is our black wire and the white tracer. I actually have a test light right here. Okay, I'm gonna connect my test light to battery positive and then switch up. So I'm gonna switch up. So this wire here, I'm actually gonna disconnect my multimeter, and now I'm gonna connect to battery. I'm gonna connect to battery positive. So I'm gonna get my test light to battery positive and connect this ground, this fuel sending unit ground to my test light that's connected to battery positive. So if our ground is good, this test light should light. And as you guys can tell, I hope you guys can see this. So the test light is lit. So this confirms the circuit integrity of our ground. So this tells me that our ground is just fine. Let me show you what I'm doing here. Just back to the wiring diagram. So we were testing this side. So I had my test light connected to battery positive, and I connected the test light to this side of the circuit. So I connected it to this wire, and the test light lit. So this tells me that this side of the circuit is good as well. So the last test we're gonna do is now we're gonna bypass this sending unit, because right now with our sending unit connector disconnected, the fuel gauge is still reading full. So it means when there's two things. It's either there's an open here on the dash, or when the dash sees this 10.89 volts, or I don't know if the battery is getting weak, but whatever, when the battery sees a voltage over 10 volts, it just shows full tank. So it's either that or an open circuit on this leg of the circuit. Now we're gonna test, now we're gonna do our final check, which is gonna tell us if this side of the circuit is good, or, and now, yeah, if this side of the circuit is good, and it's also gonna confirm to us that the sending unit is the problem in this case. So what we're gonna do, now we're gonna bypass this guy. So we're gonna connect our test light to this side of the circuit. So test light to this side of the circuit and connect it to the other side of the circuit. So test light between these two wires. So yellow and white wire and black and white wire. Okay, so it's not gonna light, but the test light is gonna kind of act as a buffer in this scenario. So the test light is, because I'm not connecting, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to connect this wire straight to battery ground, because if you do, it might overload this circuit with current, which can damage your driver inside your computer, which can eventually damage your computer. So what you need to do is you have to put a test light in between. As the current goes through the bulb, of your test light, it kind of acts as a buffer for the circuit. Okay, so now let's bypass this sending unit and see what our gauge is going to show. I don't know if this test light is in a shot here. Try to zoom out so I can kind of show you what I'm doing. So there is my connector. So I got my back probe, I got the wires back probed on the back of the electrical connector. So I have pretty much the test light in series. Here it goes. So it goes all the way down there. So this is, I got the test light in series with the circuit. So I'm just bypassing the fuel sending unit. So the test light right now is acting as the fuel sending unit. If the reading inside the dash changes, this will confirm our diagnosis. It will tell us that the fuel sending unit inside the tank is the problem. So now let's go inside the dash. Inside the car, not inside the dash. You don't want to get inside the dash. You're not even gonna fit there. Remember guys, when we were turning the key on, the gauge was going straight to the full mark. Now let's turn the key on and see what happens. So with the key on, the gauge is staying at empty. So the gauge is not moving anymore. Watch this. See? The gauge is no longer going anywhere. So this test confirms that our circuit is good. Our wiring from the fuel sending unit all the way up to the computer and the cluster is good. Let's go under the van and check and disconnect the test light and see what happens. Here is our test light in series with our circuit. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna disconnect this test light. So now I'm gonna disconnect the test light from the circuit. So now what I just did is I created an open in the circuit. So now let's go turn the key, let's go and cycle the key on and off and see what our gauge is gonna read now. So here we are, key is off, test light is disconnected from the circuit. Let's turn Let's turn the key on. Let's turn the key on and see what happens. See there, back to full. So with the key on and the test light disconnected from the circuit, our fuel gauge is reading full now. Awesome. This is pretty sweet. So our diagnosis is right, guys. The problem is inside the tank. We have to drop that tank and look at the fuel sending unit. I believe it's probably rusted out. I mean, looking at how rusty the tank is, I believe it's rusty, and if we replace our fuel sending unit, this issue here will be fixed. Okay, so let's go back under the van. I have determined that the fuel sending unit is faulty on this van. Here is the fuel tank. So what's next? Tear it down, right? We have to tear this thing down. We have to drop the fuel tank. And the fuel tank here is got straps. There is this strap right here that goes up there. So those are the bolts. It's got 2 bolts. Man, this thing is like super rusty. Oh wow, it's a 98. And then there's another strap right here. I mean, pretty straightforward. 2 lines up there. Once we disconnect those lines and get these straps out of the way, we can lower the whole tank. The tank is secured on the frame by these 2 straps. So we have to take 2 bolts on each end of the strap. So there's 1 bolt here, another one over there. And then there is 2 here. There's a stud and then another stud on the inside. And then so once we take those off, we should be able to lower the fuel tank. So I have a transmission jack under the fuel tank. I already got everything disconnected. So the fuel tank is basically ready to come out. I'm not going to be able to drop it by myself, so I have Ivan here with me. Here's Mr. Ivan. Ivan is saying hi to you guys. So we're going to drop this tank with Ivan here. Okay guys, so here is our fuel tank. Now let's you see how dirty it is. We're gonna clean it up first. Okay guys, I cleaned up the top of the tank, and I'm gonna remove these fuel lines. I'm gonna get the fuel lines out of the fuel sending unit. This silver piece here, you see this round piece here is the fuel sending unit, and I'm gonna remove these fuel hoses too. This one is actually cracked and the hole hardened. I'm gonna replace these hoses too. So let me start by removing these hoses first. Okay guys, so I got the old fuel level sending unit out of the tank. So right now the next step would be, we know that the fuel sending unit is defective. We're gonna get it out of here, clean the tank. Here's the new part. We actually had this in stock. We have our own little part store here. So we had this sending unit in stock, but I want to go an extra step to kind of test this sending unit and figure out what exactly went wrong. I mean, is it open? Is it shorted? Because you either have you usually have two types of failures on these sending units. It's usually you can have a shorted unit or an open unit. So, and again, you don't have to do this. We have already basically determined that this is bad. But I like testing things. I like figuring out why, things act up the way they do. And it can be a learning opportunity for me and for some of you guys out there. So, this is unnecessary, but we're just gonna check and do some comparisons here and see what we can learn. So since this sending unit here is nothing but a variable resistor, so what we're gonna do is I'm gonna use a multimeter and take an ohm measurement on the resistor. So I have two test leads here. That I have two back probes here connected to my multimeter test leads. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna back probe these two wires for the old sending unit, and we're gonna take an ohm measurement of this old resistor. So I'm gonna connect my black back probe. I'm gonna back probe this yellow wire, and then the red one I'm gonna back probe the pink wire. So, and as you guys can tell, right here the float is sitting at the empty position. So it's sitting on the bottom of the tank. At the empty position we are reading 98 ohms. Okay, so now let's act as if my hand here was the fuel. Okay, so you put fuel inside the tank, this float starts to go up, and this is what's supposed to happen. The resistance is supposed to increase as the float comes up, as it goes towards the top of the tank. So we keep pushing it. Bam. So now we are reading 243 ohms of resistance at full mark, at the full mark range. So there's one thing I have noticed. As I was going up, I don't know if you saw that, the resistance kind of jumped. It actually went up to even 400 ohms. Check this out. Hopefully I can duplicate it here. Yeah, see? Did you see that 600, 300? Watch. 7. Did you see this 8? Do you see the 800? Oh, even 15. Even 1500 ohms. Look at that. Did you see that 6? Yeah, so it's jumping. I'm barely moving the float, and you can see it jumping like crazy, right? Okay, so the conclusion we can draw about this sending unit is that it's shorted. I didn't look at service information to find out what the spec, the ohm spec is for this sending unit. I didn't see the need to, but what I can do is we can actually do the same thing on the new sending unit and compare the readings we're gonna get on the new sending unit to the old one. And this unit is the same as this one. The only difference is that this one is a little beefed up. It's got 2 extra filters here. So they have this white casing, the white case you see here is actually 2 extra filters they have put here to filter the fuel, to catch all those contaminants a little bit better. Okay, I know, I mean, there's a screen, there's a filter here, there's a screen here, but they have 2 extra filters there. So now let's do the same test on, see if I can get it to sit here. Yeah, so now I'm gonna get the so same thing, like I said, we got the same wires, you know, same color wires, same connector, same thing, same. So now let's back probe these wires. So let's switch to this sending unit. Okay, now on this new unit we are reading 158 ohms, but this one is at the full mark. So this one is in the full position. You see the float is close to the flange, to the mounting flange right here. So if I push it back, and guys, look at the multimeter, look at the screen and see how nice and smooth these numbers decrease as I push this float towards the bottom. Look at that. No jumps, no, you know, it's not jumping up and down. This is what it's supposed to look like. So empty, at the empty position we're reading 14 ohms. You know, but on the defective sending unit we were reading was it 99 ohms, 99 or 98 ohms at the empty position. And look at this, see how the resistance is increasing nicely and smoothly. So at the full mark, we are reading 158 ohms on the new sending unit, you know. But on the old sending unit, we were reading about 200 and, was it 222, 221 ohms. So we can, I mean, this makes me happy, you know. I like to go the extra step to really check things and test things. So guess what, guys, we were right. The issue was laying right here. So the fuel sending unit is shorted. Okay, so let's clean up the fuel tank and install the new sending unit in the tank and put it back together. And once I get everything back together, I will give you guys a shot of the after repair stuff. But so we're good to go now. Let's put this back together. And so I'm gonna clean the tank. Okay guys, the fuel tank is ready to go. Okay guys, I almost got everything back together now. So all the straps are tightened up. I got the fuel filler neck hose back on. Now I'm gonna connect the fuel lines and I'm gonna lower the van. We're gonna put fuel and test our fuel gauge inside the car. Guys, I'm back inside the van, but this time with a new fuel sending unit inside the fuel tank. So the fuel tank is back on. We installed a new fuel level sending unit inside the fuel tank. So now let's turn the key on and see if this fuel gauge is still gonna read full. The tank is empty right now. I haven't put fuel inside the tank yet, but let's turn the key on and see what we're gonna see. So key on. That is a fix, guys. The fuel gauge is stuck at the empty position. Let me turn the key back off. Let's turn it on. So nothing is happening to the gauge. So I have a little bit of fuel here, so I'm gonna put fuel inside the tank and see if we can get this gauge here to move. I mean, this gauge should move once we put a little bit of fuel inside the tank. So let's do that and confirm our fix once more, and then we'll wrap up this video. So just focus on that fuel gauge. I'm gonna turn the key on and let's see. Right there. Can you guys see? Key on. Now we're reading quarter tank. When I turn the key off now, it goes back to empty. So remember, at the beginning of this video, once you turn the key on, the fuel gauge was reading full, no matter how much fuel you had in the tank. So now, with that little bit of fuel we put in, it's reading quarter tank right now. There. So I guess we fixed it, guys. This is a fix. Alright, so let's wrap up this video. Before we do, we're gonna make a quick summary of what we've done. Remember guys, at the beginning I gave you guys a shot of the fuel gauge that was reading full all the time. Okay, so we looked at the wiring diagram and we found out how this system works. So we went ahead and did some testing, and after testing we have determined that the fuel sending unit in the tank was faulty. So we dropped the tank, we checked the fuel sending unit just to double check if that was actually the issue. That step was unnecessary because we already determined that the wiring and the circuit integrity, everything else was good. But I like to go a step further to test things to realize what went wrong and what caused what, you know. So it's always good to be curious and take a step further to test things out instead of just throwing parts at cars. So we determined that it was the fuel sending unit was faulty. We cleaned the fuel tank, we installed a new fuel sending unit, we put it back inside the van. So when I turned the key on, I brought you guys in the van to turn the key on with the fuel tank empty. The gauge was now reading empty, so that was already good. It confirmed our fix. But I wanted to go another step further to put some fuel inside the tank to check if the gauge was gonna move. I already knew it was gonna move, but that was just another, step, further, just for fun. So we put some fuel and then it showed us quarter tank, which once again confirmed our fix. So I'm glad we fixed it, guys, and I hope you like this video. If you like it, give it a thumbs up. If you don't like it, give it a thumb down. But if you do, you gotta tell me why, so that we can produce better videos in the future. Do not forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, K Diagnostics, And while you are down there, don't forget to ring the bell so that you can get notified every time I upload a video. Thanks for watching. See you guys next time.